Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Varun Sriram with Generation UCAN, and we are thrilled to have along with us head strength and conditioning coach from Quinnipiac University, Brijesh Patel. Brijesh, thanks so much for joining us for this discussion today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This has been a long time. We've been trying to organize this and figure this out, so I'm glad it finally worked out.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm really excited to get your insight on a lot of things pertaining to strength and conditioning and really fueling for hockey, which is our topic of discussion today. So that's what we're really going to dive deep into over the next 30 minutes. But before we start, Brajesh, tell us a little bit about your background. What kind of got your passion to work with athletes from a strength and conditioning standpoint, and how did you end up at Quinnipiac?
I've always loved athletics, and I realized I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach when I was in high school. When I was younger, I was always kind of overweight and obese, and I went out to play sports, and I struggled. And the biggest struggle was my freshman year in high school. I played football and realized I was last in conditioning drills and last in and being able to earn playing time and stuff like that. So I kind of committed, and I got cut from the freshman basketball team. So kind of committed myself towards changing my body and being able to put myself in a better position to be successful, so I had a better chance of playing the next year. And so I would read anything on fitness and health and nutrition that I could get my hands on at that time, and I ended up losing a lot of weight and essentially changing my whole lifestyle and changing how I ate and how I trained and how I exercised and how I did things, and basically my mindset, everything kind of changed. And that carried on through high school, and then I started to realize and look into what I wanted to do when I went to college, and I found out that you could be a strength conditioning coach. And I knew I wasn't the most athletic person. I wasn't going to continue my playing career in college, but I wanted to be able to influence other athletes in a positive way and realize I can kind of share my message and share my story of how to be a little bit, how to change things and how to become successful. And I loved athletics, so I wanted to be able to do something like that where I can influence athletics for a positive and change things and help change people's lives for the better. And I always loved fitness and training and all that kind of stuff. So when you can put all those things together, I thought it was awesome. So I went to UConn, University of Connecticut, and I saw a poster, or saw like a little flyer in the varsity in the regular fitness center about coming out to meet Andrea Hootie, who was an assistant strength coach at that time, give a topic about something or give a talk about something. So I went and I met her, and I said, hey, listen, I want to be a strength coach. I want to do what you do. What do I do? And she's like, well, go meet our head strength coach, Jerry Martin, and then talk to him. And so I did that and told him what I wanted to do. And he's like, okay, we'll give you a call back. And one of the strength coaches at the time, he was a graduate assistant, he called me and he said, hey, you want to come watch track and field? I said, absolutely. So I would come and I watched the workout and observed, and then Coach Martin would bring me into his office and ask me questions. And if I didn't know the answer, he said, okay, go look it up and come back. And that's essentially how my entire freshman year went. Like every time I didn't know something, I went out and found the answers or found the answers to his question, went back, and then he quizzed me on other things, and I think it was more of a test to see how committed I was, and so and he couldn't get rid of me. So I kept going back and kept asking questions and things like that until they gave me more and more responsibility. By the time my freshman year, he allowed me to help coach some athletes, which was unreal. And then every year my role grew there, and I got more and more experience. I was able to do some internships with other strength coaches along the way, Mike Boyle and then Jeff Oliver at the College of the Holy Cross, and that second one led me into my first full-time job at Holy Cross, and I was there for 4.5 years, and then this opportunity at Quinnipiac came up, and that was in the fall of 2008, and I've been here since, and it's been awesome to be here specifically because I was able to start the program from scratch. There was no strength and conditioning coach in place before I got here, which is really kind of nice and unique of a situation where you get to implement your philosophy and your style and your culture and the things you believe in, and you get to kind of see it kind of grow, and it's been really rewarding to see how things have developed and how strength conditioning and what we do has impacted every single student athlete that we see.
And you talked about building the Quinnipiac program from scratch. We're talking specifically about hockey today. Tremendous amount of success enjoyed by the hockey teams at Quinnipiac over the last several years. The men in the national championship game a couple times over the last few seasons. both in your time at Holy Cross, as you first started working with athletes, as well as you moved to Quinnipiac, what were some of the major challenges that you quickly were able to identify in terms of fueling for these college athletes who are balancing, their class schedule and other responsibilities with also training and working out and competition? And maybe we can start with training, from a day-to-day basis when these athletes were coming in to the weight room to get work in. What were some of the biggest challenges you were quickly able to identify with how they were fueling their bodies?
One of the first things I always do is I'll ask people, like when I first got here, I don't do it as much as I used to, but I used to ask them, what'd you eat for breakfast? Would you, I probably shouldn't even start there. I probably should start with I realize like nutrition is a huge part of any athlete's development because you're only as good as your ability to recover. And the way I look at nutrition, not only from a fueling aspect, but it's also a huge part in recovery. And if you're recovered and you have the proper fuel, then you're going to be able to train hard and you're going to be able to work hard that day. And during my time at Holy Cross, I just really realized that because academics is really a big, it's very rigorous at Holy Cross, and to try to balance out college athletics was a challenge for a lot of our student athletes. So we started realizing that we have to give them some tools, not only just in terms of supplements and nutritional type stuff, but we got to give them tools in terms of education and trying to get them to educate them about how to eat better in the cafeteria. I remember when I first got to Holy Cross, I went down to the cafeteria with our basketball team, and I taught them how to eat in the cafeteria. I mean, how to be able to change your body composition for the betterment. We would do nutrition talks every single semester with every single team and get them to understand how to fuel properly so that they can be healthier and perform at a higher level. And then when I got to Quinnipiac, it was the same thing. I met with our men's hockey team on the first day of school, and I talked about our policies, procedures, rules, all that kind of stuff, expectations, but I also talked about probably 30 minutes of nutrition and how to eat the right way, because I'm a firm believer that nutrition is 90% of the equation. 10% is the training part and what you put into it, but you've got to fuel the right way if you want to get the performance benefits that you want to get.
Now, when you were, that philosophy, not just of, expressing to the athletes, this is what you should do, but the why behind it, how critical do you feel, that is for buy-in, not just telling the athletes they should do it, but getting them to understand and think critically, this is why we're doing it this way?
Yeah, it's a huge part of it, and it kind of goes along with our philosophy. Like our philosophy of our strength conditioning program, number one is reduce the chance of injury. Second is to make better athletes, and third thing is to educate. So nutritional education is a huge part of that educational platform, and I tell recruits this all the time. I'm not the type of coach who's going to say do this because I said so. I'm going to get you to try to understand why we're actually doing it. So when it comes to nutrition and getting them to understand how to fuel their performance and help recover better, we're going to educate them on why that's important. We're going to educate them on why the timing of it's important. We're going to educate them on the composition and why that's important. We're going to educate them about supplementation and if it's warranted and if you need it. It's a huge part of the process, and I would like to think that everybody gets it from day one, but that's not the case. Like, it's a constant educational challenge that needs to get done. Like, you might get through to somebody on the first day you see them. You might get through to somebody in the third month. You might get through to somebody in the second year that they're in the program. You just got to understand, like, you got to keep doing it and doing it and doing it over and over until you get them to understand. Finally, it get clicks, because I can tell them, like, listen, this is your body. You only have one body, and that's the only one you're getting, right? So you got to make sure you understand how to take care of it and how to manage it, so you have some ownership in the process. Like, that's another big thing that we always say, is take ownership in the process of your development. It's not my training session, it's not my season, it's your season, it's your practice, it's your workout right now. So make sure that you get everything that you can out of it. And so that's part of the process. We have to educate them about how to get the most out of it.
I know you touched a little bit on recovery and that being an extremely important philosophy and something that you really want to educate athletes about. Perhaps we could split this up into sort of two elements. As you were starting to implement your strength and conditioning philosophy and your fueling philosophy at Quinnipiac, when athletes were coming in to training sessions and workouts, what were some of the common threads that you were finding, hey, I really need to get them to think about this differently or improve what they're currently doing?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this before. Like I would often ask athletes, I'm like, "What'd you eat for breakfast? What'd you have for lunch? When was the last time you ate?" Because I think I'm pretty good at reading people, and I can kind of get a good idea of like what somebody's body language is, and it kind of tells me a lot about what kind of state they're in. And if I see that they're lethargic and they have no energy, and I ask those kinds of questions, and it's say, "Well, I've eaten a granola bar today, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon." Like I know you're not going to have enough juice to be able to get through this session right now. And then I say like, well, how good do you really want to be? Like I start to ask questions to put the onus on them to try to develop their own ownership. Like, don't tell me, because we set goals and they talk about goals that they want to set and we go through those and review them. So don't tell me that you have a goal and then you're not willing to back it up by making sure that you have enough nutrition to making sure that you can train hard enough today or get through a practice today or understanding on a day when you might have practice plus a lift. Right, that might be a 3.5 hour day that day, or you know what I mean. It's going to be a long day. You got to make sure that you're doing your end of the bar, you're holding up your end of the bargain to make sure that we can get what we need to get out of you, and right, so you can ultimately get better. So it's that was a big piece first is really getting to understand how to eat more consistently and how to plan. Really, like I think a lot of the things, the biggest challenge early on is like a lot of the kids would just eat when they felt like it. They wouldn't plan ahead. They wouldn't shop. Then they'd be eating fast food or eating things probably that aren't the best options for them. So planning became a big part of it too, and that meant I had to plan on my end. So whether that be handouts or lectures, or we've done recovery presentations in the past, and then ultimately being able to provide them with more nutritional aids to try to help with that kind of stuff, so save on time, and then be able to stock our locker rooms with food and snacks and all that kind of stuff to try to help them within the process.
A lot of times, whether it's athletes or just the general everyday person, people aren't always able to discern between, how is like if you look at an ingredient label, if it's a carbohydrate, how is one type of carbohydrate different than another type of carbohydrate. In the context of pre-workout fueling, how specific do you get with your athletes where this is what you want to look at in a carb source, or you want to pair, X amount of carb with X amount of another macronutrient? Like how do you get very technical there, or is it more like identifying foods that would be beneficial at certain periods?
Yeah, we don't get too technical because you got to understand, like, unless we try not to get too technical from that standpoint. We're not going to talk to them about ratios or anything like that, because the first thing we want to do is making sure that they're eating something before practice, right? Like that's the biggest challenge. If they're getting nothing, then we give them something, even if it's a granola bar, or if it's half a bagel with peanut butter, or if it's like a protein bar. If that's it, that's better than it was before. And then once they get in the routine of making sure that they eat something within at least 1 to 2 hours before practice or something like that, then we'll start talking about the composition of it too. And it's like an onion. You just add layers on top of layers upon top of layers. So let's start the simplest thing first. We've had that with athletes who they get sick in the morning. They can't eat anything for breakfast. I'm like, can you eat a bowl of cereal? And they'll say, well, I'll try it. Like, that's not the best thing, but it's something. And we can start from there. Then we can talk about eggs, and we can talk about making sure that we get protein and we get good fat and like avocados and things like that. So the biggest thing first, the first hurdle, is just making sure that they're eating consistently every 3 to 4 hours. Then we can start worrying about the quality of those kinds of meals. And everybody's going to be different. A lot of people, especially some of our hockey athletes, are very in tune with their body, and they've heard about good nutrition for a long time, while others haven't. Some people ask higher level questions than other people. You know what I mean? And so everybody's got a different knowledge base, and so that's my job, as well as our sports nutritionist job, to try to get them to understand gradually like how to become a little bit better in terms of their preparation and recovery of nutrition.
How about the post-workout nutrition? What are you preaching to athletes that they need to care about and consider immediately after a tough session or immediately after a game?
We want to make sure that they get some sort of liquid nutrition, usually in the forms of a protein shake or something like that, into their system as quickly as possible, so we can digest it. We'll do, we have shakes available for them, obviously UCAN stuff available for them. We try to educate them on a daily basis to make sure we get something in right away, and then within another 2 hours or so, then make sure you're getting a meal. That we want to get something in their system as quickly as possible, so we can start the recovery process.
So, Coach B, we've kind of talked about your background and your overall philosophy to training, some of the ideas that you were trying to implement as you got to Quinnipiac and were trying to build the strength and conditioning philosophy from the ground up. want to switch a little bit of gears now into talking about the team and your personal use of UCAN and how it came on your radar. And for those that are here with us in the audience that don't know, this is one of the UCAN products, one of the powders that that Coach B has been implementing with his athletes for several years now. Gosh, must be close to 5 years now. And so
7.
You know, yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. But before we start kind of with more specifics, how did UCAN come on your radar from a product standpoint? You probably have, you know, hundreds of products being passed along to you in your time working in this industry. What stuck with UCAN when it was first presented to you, and why was it of interest to you?
Well, it was actually one of our assistant hockey coaches came back from the coaches convention in Florida, and he told me about this product, and it was a local-based company that had it, and out of Woodbridge, Connecticut, which is probably only 10, 15 minutes away from where we are. And it was in a white packet. There was no label. There was no nothing. But he gave me the white papers that came along with it and some studies, and I'm like, okay, I'll look into it. And then I had Peter Kaufman get on the line, and we spoke and we talked about it. I did a couple webinars with Jeff Volek at the time, and I remember Jeff from my time at UConn too. He came on board just as I was about to be leaving. And the science really intrigued me about it. The science, I thought the product was nothing like I've ever seen before, where it has a minimal response or minimal impact on insulin, which was huge in terms of understanding energy and having enough energy for activity. The goal is to be able to keep your blood sugar as stable as possible. And so we don't want large fluctuations in insulin before training or when we're going through activity. And I thought it was really cool. So we trialed it, and the feedback was unbelievable. The athletes said, like, you know, they didn't feel as fatigued. They still felt like they had legs. They felt great from it. And so we're like, okay, like let's get it. And so we got it for that first year. We only got it for game days, and the feedback was really, really good. They enjoyed it, and it was a great product for us, and it did something that nobody else really had out in the market. And then when I started to really look at the physiology of it, the thing that I liked about it is that we always tell our athletes that we want them to stay as aerobic as long as possible. And so what I mean by that is hockey by nature is probably a glycolytic, or it's a lactate-based sport in terms of shift lengths. But what you have to remember is somebody may go on the ice for 30 to 45 seconds, and the predominant energy system you might be using is your lactic system, but you've got to be able to remember you've got to do those 30 to 45 second efforts over the course of a 60-minute game, which actually lasts about 2.5 hours in duration. So you need to be able to have energy for that entire length of that 2.5 hours, or God forbid you go into the playoffs and you have overtime after overtime after overtime. We've played games where we have had 5 overtime games. We've had games where we go double overtime or triple overtime. So you need to make sure that you've got enough energy and that you're well developed aerobically and fitness-wise to be able to make sure that your body can still produce energy at a high amount using the appropriate energy system. So I felt like UCAN backed up what we did in terms of training, allowing us to develop a robust aerobic system to be able to fuel our activity for whatever we're going to do forever, how long we're going to do.
That's really interesting to hear your perspective on what caught your eye, and just a couple points I wanted to show based on what you just said, Coach B. So what you were talking about with UCAN in terms of the way that the carbohydrate behaves and what's unique about it. The primary carbohydrate in UCAN, we call it super starch. It's a slow-releasing, low-glycemic starch that instead of giving you that quick burst of energy like you might get from a lot of your sugar-based products, powders and bars, or different types of maltodextrin-based fuels, rather than giving you that quick burst of energy, the UCAN is much more slower releasing and sustained, so it keeps your blood sugar levels steady. And then to one of the other points you raised, looking at this graph on the screen, because that super starch, the carbohydrate in UCAN, breaks down and enters your system at such a steady and even rate, like Coach B talked about, there's no insulin response. So the body doesn't, if you look at the blue line, that's with a typical maltodextrin product. Your body, when you get the sugar spike, will produce insulin as a reaction. With the UCAN, because there's no sugar spike, there's no insulin, which will help you, like Coach B talked about, allow you to better utilize fat as a fuel source instead of relying simply on repeated refeeding of carbohydrates. So from an athlete standpoint, how have the guys used it, both on training days, on competition days, and what type of feedback are you hearing from athletes that have been using UCAN to fuel them?
Well, we use it with both our men's and women's programs, and we give it to them on game days and then also on our training days. So, and the days when I say training days, we typically strength train Mondays and Wednesdays, and then we practice as well. So those are our longer days. So we want to make sure that they have enough fuel to be able to get them through those longer days. So they will. So we'll use a pre-UCAN beforehand, and we try to tell them to have it at least 30 to 60 minutes beforehand, and then a post with protein afterwards. So we will do that. We've done that formula probably for 5 years. I think for the first 2 years we just did it on game days, and then we felt like, you know what, let's get on days that they're going to be really long too. And the best feedback that I can probably give you is they don't feel it when they take it. They feel on days when they don't take it. If that makes any sense at all. Yeah.
And it's kind of it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think and you can probably speak to this better than I can, certainly, but in the context of energy, we're so used to, whether it's as athletes or just society in general, taking some type of energy product, whether it's sugar based or caffeine based, and feeling that immediate jolt, and that's sort of totally counter to what the way UCAN works. Is that something you ever have to kind of coach your athletes on, or kind of warn them of, which, this isn't a typical pre-workout that you're going to take and suddenly feel that buzz? It's something that works differently. How much did you kind of have to get guys or girls used to that?
Yeah, that required a little bit of selling, because it's not the same. People would instantly think, oh, I'm going to take this, I should automatically feel a difference right away. And that's not the case at all. So we have to tell them, listen, and the same thing I told you before in terms of feedback. I'm like, listen, you're not going to notice it now. You're going to notice it on the day that you don't take it. So you need to just trust the process and understand, if we're going to invest money into something, it's going to be well worth it, and you better know that I did my homework on it. So it's going to be good, and it's used to give you a performance edge.
And for you guys, from a performance standpoint, I mean, not that this is 100% UCAN, but you guys saw some pretty significant improvement in terms of the team's performance during third periods of games. Am I remembering that correctly, where you guys were one of the top third period teams in all of college hockey a few years ago?
Yeah, we were really good. I remember I went through the stat of last year. We didn't give up a third period goal in our men's program until the 9th game of the season. And our shot margin was extremely in our favor going into third period. Our women's team too. One of our assistant coaches knows the stats, but it's a ridiculous stat of when we're leading after the first period, we might have 60 wins and 1 loss and a bunch of ties or something like that. So it's we get better as the game goes along. So that's part of it's just I think we're better conditioned than a lot of other teams, and we're better fueled for is another way to look at it too.
How does utilizing UCAN prior to games or workouts impact what athletes are doing during workouts, and realizing that different athletes you have may be different? Are you finding for the most part that your athletes fueling with UCAN pre-competition or pre-training aren't needing to fuel as much, if at all, during?
You know what? I'm not exactly sure on that. There are some guys and girls who like to do the routine of having something, whether it be during the game or pre-game, and so that's a tough one. But I do know, from some feedback, that the best feedback they get is they just feel after a game they're like I could feel like I played another period. I could feel like I keep going on. And the really cool thing about it too is that the people that have moved on from Quinnipiac and are going on to play pro hockey, we've got a number of people that play with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers. They constantly ask about how can we get UCAN? Can we get some UCAN? And they it's been that's a really cool thing, is when they understand the benefit of it, that they want to continue to use it.
You talked about utilizing the UCAN with protein in that post-workout period. So, we talked about the characteristics of the superstarch, the carbohydrate in UCAN, and how it's more slow releasing and it's not going to create that insulin response. What's the benefit of that type of low glycemic, slow releasing carbohydrate post-workout, versus something that's more sugar-based, say like chocolate milk? Why would you in your position want to utilize UCAN with the superstarch post-workout?
Well, you know what? Like I was always schooled on the fact that you need to have a high insulin response at post-training to drive protein and amino acids and glucose back into your body so you can restore them quickly. And I remember reading one paper, I can't quote the paper, but they found that you can still get the same kind of anabolic effect with a minimal insulin response. In reality, what you just need is the actual building blocks of whatever you're going to intake. So having a high quality whey protein is going to be really good. And I really think that with how much crap, excuse my language, how much bad stuff that some of our college athletes will consume and that's out there, if that we can positively impact their nutrition in and around training and practice, that's going to be so much better on their health too, because there's so many bad things associated with, so many health issues associated with just jacked up insulin and jacked up blood glucose levels, and it basically leaves your body in a constant inflammatory state. Your body's always trying to heal itself. So if there's ways that you can minimize those large fluctuations in blood glucose and insulin, and if you can have some control over that timing, then why not do it? But and then you got to educate them the best you can so they can do the right things on their own.
Absolutely, that's a good perspective. I appreciate you sharing that. B, I know we're catching you in the middle of your day, so you've got a training session to run to here in a few minutes. The last thing I just wanted to close on with you is something relatively newer from UCAN that you've probably started implementing maybe over the last year or so with the team is the UCAN snack bars, which similarly we have that super starch that we've been talking about. So for those in the audience that are listening, as you can kind of see, everything that UCAN has is kind of based around the same premise of keeping blood sugar stable, controlling insulin. We heard Coach B's philosophy at the beginning of this webinar. He, outside of UCAN, also sort of shares that philosophy, so it's probably no surprise that it's been a good marriage from a product standpoint and a philosophical standpoint. But the UCAN snack bars, where have you found your athletes finding a use for these?
They absolutely love them. They're awesome. They taste great, and the better thing about it, they're good for you too. So some of our athletes will have it like maybe before a practice, or if they're running to class. Like there's instances sometimes when they end practice or end the session, then they have to go right to a class, and then they can probably eat a meal afterwards. They'll drink shake, and then they'll have a bar with them on their way out, and then they'll have their meal a little bit later. Other instances, sometimes guys will snack on them in between periods. Girls will snack them in between periods of games as well too, to try to kind of top off and keep their blood sugars nice and level too. And then some people just like to have them, on an off day or whatever. Like they're just good. They're just good for you.
Absolutely, and I think another way to get that steady blood sugar without always having to drink a shake, which I'm sure athletes appreciate that variety. The one thing I wanted to close on with you is, when you were first introduced to UCAN and you heard about the science behind it, and you had the opportunity to get on the calls with Dr. Jeff Volek and sort of learn a little bit more about the principles behind it, you still, wanted to put it on to test on yourself before you gave it to your athletes. So I would just love for you to take us back to that time. Do you remember sort of what your aha moment was, in testing it yourself before you even brought it to the athletes?
Yeah, I tried it too. I think it was me and an intern at the time too, and we tried it. And I remember I did like a 90-minute session. I think I had planned of like just some lifting and some conditioning. And I'm like, I still feel really good. So I did like another half-hour bike ride or something. I feel, and afterwards, I was like, I feel like I can keep going. Like I literally did not feel as fatigued as I thought I would have felt, or as I probably normally felt if I hadn't taken it. So that was my big moment. I'm like, oh man, there's actually something to this.
And
So that was it. And then I'm like, oh, you got to try this. You got to try this. You got to try this.
and you guys jumped on board with it, prior to there's really no other Division One NCAA hockey teams or pro hockey teams using the product. Now it's up to about 60 to 70 colleges, 20 to 25 pro teams across a variety of sports. So Quinnipiac clearly took that leap of faith. I'll close with you with this question, Coach B. In your time, like we talked about previously, you've seen a lot of different products. You guys have utilized different things. How unique, as you've continued to use UCAN and there new things have come across your radar, how unique do you feel what UCAN has to offer is, in terms of offering an energy and recovery solution for your athletes?
It's unparalleled. There's nothing on its level. Like there's nothing that compares to it. There's nothing out there that has the same type of starch. There's nothing out there that has the same kind of impact upon blood sugar. And I keep going back to that in terms of physiology. Like you want your athletes to be aerobic engines. Like you want them to be able to go and fuel activities for long bouts and long periods of time. Even if they don't have to do it, if you have a well-developed aerobic system, it's going to allow you to do so much more. You can do more work. You can recover quicker. You can do lots of different types of things. And if you've got something that can help fuel and augment that training development that we try to get, it's a powerful combination. So I don't think there's anything out there that's similar. And I know there isn't because there's nothing else that has superstarch in it.
Well, hey, we really appreciate your feedback today. I know it's a busy week for you. You got the men's starting conference play. The women are in the thick of things in conference play. So we're going to let you go and do your real job, Coach B. But really, thank you so much for sharing your insight. Really appreciate you coming on here and sharing a bit of your training philosophy and giving us more insight on how your athletes are using UCAN and sort of the why behind it. So, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thanks for